Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining Impact Conversations with Aavishkaar Group. This is our seventh episode. I'm really excited to host and moderate this discussion today. I'm Soumya. I lead Impact in ESG at Aavishkaar Capital. To give you a quick introduction to the Aavishkaar Group, the group's journey started in 2001 and is a global pioneer in taking an entrepreneurship-based approach towards development. So today, the group reaches out and supports over 100 million people across India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and East Africa. And it's most heartening to share that 55% of whom are women. Earlier this year, the group released its Impact Report 2020, which highlights the role played by 12 amazing women leaders in shaping the future of not just their families, but their community and society. And most importantly, these women have influenced our own evolution at the Avishkar Group. Sharing these extraordinary stories gave us a sort of a push to launch the Impact Conversations with Avishkar Group, where we wanted to bring together leaders, social entrepreneurs, investors, and other stakeholders to discuss the various dimensions of impact which cut across, say, individuals, sectors, and geography. So today's episode of the Impact Conversation is on a very, very pertinent topic on energy access, ending energy poverty. So, how do we identify, create, and support opportunities that can provide access to, say, reliable, affordable, clean energy? I'd like to give you a quick context here. So, decentralized renewable energy solutions are considered a very important approach or system that can pave the way to end energy poverty, considering many of the remote areas in the world are unviable for expansion of power grids. So over the years, we've seen that decentralized renewable energy or DRE space has changed from just lighting, say providing, say, solar lanterns or lighting of households and small shops to supporting high power consuming productive use appliances. So we've also seen sectors such as healthcare in the need of sustainable energy solutions with ability to support round the clock power even in remote areas. So today we are joined by a pioneer foundation, an implementer, and ecosystem building organization to understand how DRE has reduced energy poverty over the years, and to discuss its role in achieving universal energy access or ending energy poverty. I would like to introduce the first speaker for today, Dipali Khanna, who is the Managing Director of Asia Region Office at the Rockefeller Foundation, where she manages the foundation's policy, advocacy, grant making, and partnerships in Asia. She most recently served as director and managed one of the foundation's flagship initiatives in India, Smart Power for Rural Development. In this role, she provided leadership and direction across the full range of activities, partners, and resources of the initiative to provide affordable and clean energy access to over 1 million people in India. Welcome, Dipali. We're very excited to have you on this panel today.
Thank you so much, Soumya, and really it's a privilege and pleasure to be part of this conversation. And of course, I want to begin by thanking IntelliCap and Aavishkaar, who also helped us, seed some of this work that, I'm going to be talking about today. So before I start, I also want to extend a very warm welcome to the audience. Access to energy has certainly become a central and indispensable aspect of modern life. Traditionally, energy access programs have focused on increasing the number of electricity connections. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we've been working to change the industry's approach to the problem by looking at the source of energy and the delivery mechanism rather than just increasing connections. That is where DRE systems have really stepped in to provide electricity in a reliable and equitable manner, reaching the most vulnerable people where grid connectivity is often limited. Several key trends that we are observing currently present an opportunity to end energy poverty without causing a climate disaster. First is that DRE is ready to really play a major role in modern energy systems. Through our work across India, Myanmar, and Sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen that from being almost a stopgap solution to address energy inequities, DRE today has become a commercial viable strategy to end energy poverty and has propelled the creation of value chains, be it in agriculture, rural livelihoods, or health sector, as well as is able to create local green jobs. Second is that due to the pioneering breakthroughs in DRE technologies, it is now possible to end energy poverty in the next 10 years. Over the past decade, fundamental breakthroughs have made DRE technologies more affordable, faster to deploy, and more impactful than ever before. Scaling such DRE technologies to provide green energy to the next 500 million energy poor people would save at least 1.5 billion tons of carbon emissions over the next decade. This is really the equivalent of electrifying almost the entire population of the European Union. Third is that we are in the initial stages of a once-in-a-generation investment in infrastructure. The G7 economies have already pledged more than $6.5 trillion to counter the social, economic, and financial consequences of the pandemic. This is likely to include a massive public-private investment in modern infrastructure to unlock inclusive growth for everyone, and especially those left behind. The current political scenario is poised to embrace a climate-friendly future with DRE providing an affordable solution to power a green recovery from the pandemic. So while these trends may seem obvious today, I can recall a time in our early days of setting up Smart Power India as a renewable energy initiative created to support last mile electrification in Bihar, UP, and Uttarakhand, when the availability of technical or financial resources was very limited, the appetite for experimentation and risk was low, and the cascading socioeconomic benefits of DRE were not proven. Since 2015, Smart Power India, an entity seeded by us, has provided technical support to local renewable energy serving companies to set up over 500 mini grids and promote an ecosystem for local enterprises to thrive. We've been field testing new technologies and business models that can take decentralized renewable energy from an off-grid alternative to becoming a mainstream solution for widespread rural electrification. One such example is also our partnership with Husk Power System, and I'm so glad that Chokrita is here with us. We've experimented on biomass as well as solar PV options with them over the years. Together, we've developed a hybrid model using these to ensure a steady and reliable flow of electricity for small and medium enterprises, and are building 50 more mini grids using this model. This will help power local enterprises and commercial setups, as well as providing 24/7 electricity to schools, hospitals, and women and homes in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Another example that I want to share, Soumya, is the utility-in-a-box technology that we developed with the Institute for Transformative Technologies. This innovation not only protects sensitive equipment from the harsh heat of Indian summers and its torrential monsoons, but also compresses this into a box, which can be stored beneath a solar panel, saving valuable square footage. It reduces build time from months to a matter of weeks, with a significant cost reduction that makes the system more commercially viable. So utility in a box also facilitates efficient assembly and smooth communication between all the components of a microgrid. So apart from this, we've also learned early on what by focusing on renewables, the entire value chain becomes more sustainable, and the decentralized approach necessitates engagement and participation of local communities. I think this is really critical. By working with local communities, we not only focus on providing reliable energy, but also the socioeconomic benefits, such as creating green jobs that can be reaped along the way. Green power projects create 3 times the direct and indirect jobs per $1 million invested when compared to fossil fuel-based projects. But the number could rise far higher if we can realize the full potential of DRE to create local, sustainable, highly skilled jobs. Globally, about 20 million direct jobs could be created in the DRE sector itself. Building upon all these learnings, in 2019, we've also collaborated with Tata Power's Renewable Microgrid Limited to develop 10,000 mini grids in rural India in order to serve up to about 25 million people in 5 million households. So I hope that answers your question, Soumya. Over to you.
Thanks, Dipali, for a wonderful, end-to-end, like an ecosystem approach to looking at DRE. And Rockefeller, of course, is a pioneer in this and has worked extensively to demonstrate how DRE can be a sustainable model to end energy poverty, just with the numbers you're giving. So we heard from Dipali now. Let's move to another player in the ecosystem, an implementer, Saugata Datta, India country director of Haas Power Systems, which designs, builds, and operates renewable energy powered mini grids in off grid rural areas. So, Saugata has been working in the solar PV industry for 24 plus years and in the top management portfolio for the last 4 years. He has extensive experience in leading business units across various verticals, including MW projects, rooftops, system integration through channels, and also uh, conceptualization, project business development, and execution. So Hus Power has initiated its DRE plants in Bihar, India, and has subsequently scaled to support the rural population of Tanzania. I have two sets of questions for you, Saugata. What are some of the key impact considerations for your organization while establishing DRE solution in remote areas? And second, tell us some of the factors that one should keep in mind to establish operations in, say, difficult or remote terrains of the world or geographies of the world.
Well, thank you, Soumya, and thank you for hosting this episode of Impact Conversions. And again, a hearty welcome to the audience who has given their been giving their patient hearing to us. Yes, so going on to the DRE space, to answer the first question, why did us enter into this space? So we have to go a bit back, as far as India is concerned, wherein, so we had announced, that the villages are fully electrified, right? And so we don't have any dearth of electricity, but the reality was absolutely different in remote areas. So you'd have the grid connections, you'd have the poles, you'd have the wires, and but you don't have the electrons there, so there's no electricity. And so this was the challenge which the remote folks faced. I'm talking about 10 years back, and it was really difficult. It was a mammoth task for the government to really go up to the last mile to provide the services to these rural folks in terms of quality, reliability, and abundance. So basically, if you look at electricity, it is the basic ingredient for any activity, uh, especially any kind of economic activity, and of course the social well-being. So what we identified is that there is a very big vacuum, especially in the developing states within our country, like Bihar and UP, where it has large tracts of rural, or I would say peri-urban areas, but without proper electricity. I won't say that it's void of, absolutely void of electricity, but then there were brownouts, there were interruptions for a day or so, sometimes hours, and this was hindering the socio-economic development in the rural areas. And so that was the key driver for us to go into this space and addressing this gap in these states. So when we conceptualized the decentralized power plants, we had three things in mind, that I have to give power, we have to give power to the rural folks as we give it in the cities. So I need to give them abundant power, I need to give them reliable power, and I need to give them quality power. So we have seen, in fact, over my travels over the last 25 years, I've seen, so you if you go to a very remote villages, I still remember about Sundarban areas, where, so you'll find an incandescent bulb glowing, but there's no intensity of that bulb. So you can't see, and I could see a person, in spite of the bulb glowing there, lighting a candle and working. Or I don't know whether hurricane or not. Those things are, now gone into oblivion. So, working under a kerosene lamp. So this is where we addressed, and we brought in technology. We brought in, the renewable aspect of technology, and those which could be replicated, which could be done in a smaller, scale, and multiplied in various areas of interventions. So we brought in biomass first, because biomass is something where you get the local produce, the rice husks. You could use them as your fuel, as a substitute to the fossil fuels. And then so once we started with biomass, we understood that there's a big change going on in the solar domain, solar photovoltaic domain, and we need to bring this to the rural areas. So then we started a hybrid model of biomass and solar, and started installing our own plants. Yes, Rockefeller has been a great ally to us and friend in our initial days in incubation period. So this was the beginning, and gradually we understood that it's not just about giving, the earlier concept of just providing light to the rural households. That is not enough. You need to do something to upgrade the quality of living of the people. So quality of living is not just having electricity at home and running your appliances, but then also start doing some economic activities. So our focus in this sector was typically going for commercial establishments. So we address the markets where commercial activities could be undertaken. We address the factories, small SMEs, or I would say micro SMEs, MSMEs, for example, some small biscuit factories, some ice cream factories, some welding shops, right? And likewise, some atta chakki mills, who were, starved of power, the regular grid power. So we came to them and said that we'll provide you these three things: abundant power, reliable power, and quality power. And that is how we brought in synergy between us and these customers. We lived by our promises, and they also flourished, and we also grew, and that is how it has been so far in India. Africa is a bit different from India. While poverty, the starvation is there. It's similar to India, but it's still, I think, in a stage which is, I would say, relatively back compared to the situation in India. So we are working in Tanzania and Nigeria, these two countries in Africa. Okay. So there we have used a bit different model. For example, in Tanzania, you can't actually sell power. You're not so power has to be free. So what we do there is so Deepali was talking about that. So we build in various other economic activities. For example, we run some grain processing units with our power, and package it and give it to the customer. So he gets a value added service from the grains that he produces in the field. So so we could also, we would be renting out some, let's say, energy efficient welding machines to the customer to start an activity, a small welding shop, right? And we take equated monthly installments from them. So this is, so there, while the power is the main ingredient, and it is on renewables, but there the activity is slightly different. But if you look at both these, whatever be the process of or the methodology of business, but if you look at the take a bird's eye view, ultimately it's what we are focused as us is on the economic activities, and to grow the level of the people in rural areas through more and more economic activities. That has been our focus.
That's wonderful, Saugata. Thanks so much for sharing some on-ground experience. I think you have highlighted all the necessary prerequisites of an impact entrepreneur, pushing boundaries, coming up with innovative solutions, not just in technology, but also in business process and based on the local context, and really triggering development. Thank you so much for sharing. I would like to turn to our third speaker for today, Santosh Singh, who leads the energy and climate change practice at Intellicap, supporting clean energy entrepreneurs with knowledge, network, and capital solutions. He has more than 15 years of experience in base of the pyramid market development with a focus on energy access, climate resilient agriculture, and climate finance. So Santosh, welcome. You have an extensive experience of supporting DRE solutions, and you have witnessed its transition over the years in different roles across World Bank, GIZ, and now Intellicap. What are some of the key success factors that has enabled DRE to move from providing just lighting to enabling large-scale productive use appliances?
Thank you, Soumya, and a warm welcome to all the people attending this, and greetings of the day for different people from different time zone. I think after Dipali and Swagata's comment, I don't need to talk about the success of the DRE sector because it has been proven. We see that, in fact, if I, re-jog my memory to, 15 years back, my first visit to Husk Power, or I came to know about Husk Power through a visit to Tamkuha. That was the place where the first plant was started, and even to reach out to that place was a kind of an achievement in those times. So I would like to focus on a couple of things that I think that has been the hallmark of the resilience of this DRE sector and where it has reached. I think Swagata touched on that, but it has shown the agility. It overcomes some of the most pressing challenges in business models, in financing, in building trust of the customers, showcasing that this is not an intermediate solution, but this is the solution. These problems for me, were so kind of pervasive across the sector that DRE proved that, these all can be overcome and we can achieve something big. So both, I think, Husk Power and many of the entrepreneurs who did that, and Rockefeller for kind of building that ecosystem and supporting, I think is a big round of applause for them because they did that very well. And then we are here to, talk about that. I think my, couple of factors that I see, which often get missed into this discussion on the, energy access success story, is that how the ecosystem around energy access evolved. To give you a kind of, a realistic picture, what I'm talking about, if a plant broke down in Tamkuha, there was no mechanic, and the repair was to be kind of waiting as spare part from some metro, and that need to be delivered in 2-3 days time, and that was the situation. It was, if you wanted to buy a 5,000 rupee solar home system, there was no one to finance you, and you did not know what to do if this thing did not work. And it required a fair amount of convincing that this can solve your problem. This can give you light. So these were the challenges which at that point of time when we were doing all this work looked like insurmountable, like how to kind of overcome that. Look at today, the financing ecosystem, if you want to buy a DRE product, it's available. If you want to set up a DRE plant, it's available. If a commercial venture looks at solarizing itself, there are schemes available at a very, very attractive interest rate to get you there. So the financing landscape has triggered a phenomenal kind of growth story of the DRE. So that's the finance part. If I recall one example of another DRE champion, Delight Design, Delight is now called Delight only. They had the solar lanterns and they were convincing people of the robustness of that lantern by throwing the lantern on the ground with very vigorous force and showing that it's not that fragile. Right. That was the trust building at that point of time. So right now we don't have to do all of this. So for me, the success in financing, the trust in the product, and overall kind of the goodwill that entrepreneurs created about the solution has been the big driver. I would also say that the policy played a very critical role as the entrepreneurs proved that this is a big story that can end energy poverty. The policy started kind of kicking in with favorable environment. I can say be it Suprabha, which is driving the CNI segment and the solar rooftop, or Saubhagya scheme, or Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, all of these came and drove the sector completely to a new height. However, I think the one point that I want to highlight is that for me, the most takeaway story of DRE sector over 15 years is that we started looking at DRE as the tool to end energy poverty. What we have got here is that we are looking at DRE as tool to increase the prosperity. The whole theory has changed. From ending energy poverty to becoming more prosperous is the theme. The second big takeaway is that, it was an intermediate solution. It was an interim solution. We were, sick of answering question that what would happen if the grid comes and you are only providing light, which is like very feeble. It's only like, 2 watt and 3 watt, and it's not sufficient. The lumens are. The second story is that DRE is not an intermediate solution. DRE is the solution for a large number of households for large segment. If you just purely look at the number of households that could possibly be only provided energy access globally through DRE, the number stands at 250 million households.
Wow.
Which is phenomenal. So being a solution which was kind of not so desirable is now the solution that everybody is looking at. The third dimension is that DRE has shown that how the social entrepreneurs can create big change. I would say that the recent announcement of Reliance and the big names for the sector, it to some extent, owes to this revolution that Rockefeller, Husk Power, and many others such a stakeholder caused. I could have very well laughed at the idea that Tata Power would, partner to go and do the mini grids in 2008-9. This has happened. So a big thanks to the sector for building the ecosystem. A big kind of thank you from the our champions or kind of the custodians the we serve, the 3 billion people, because they are looking at the DRE as their hope. So all power to you, and I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Santosh Singh. Very good points highlighted. Financing, trust, and goodwill built by the entrepreneurs and really policymakers and ecosystem builders such as Rockefeller Foundation really driving development. It's like you rightly said, it's not about ending energy poverty, but bringing economic prosperity. I think that's wonderful. With that, I'd like to turn to Dipali again. We understand that with the right mix of, say, technology, financing, and capacity building, Rockefeller has played an instrumental role in shaping the existing DRE ecosystem. What are some of the key levers of intervention strategies that the foundation is focusing on to scale the impact of DRE? Specifically to promote a role of DRE in supporting other sectors, such as, say, agri or healthcare, and so on.
Thank you, Soumya. And before I jump into answering that question, I just want to reinforce what Santosh said so eloquently. Like, energy access is not an end in itself. It's really about driving economic development so that transformational change happens in rural communities. I think that is really critical. I think also what we've seen, and for me, I've been in the development sector for over 3 decades and stopped counting now. But to be able to see the kind of speed and agility with which you can get electricity to villages and electricity that is reliable has been pretty phenomenal. Like in 4 weeks to 6 weeks, you can get an unelectrified village electricity. And I myself have witnessed what it does when you look at women's empowerment, safety of girls, ability for kids to study, and just all the livelihood opportunities and the thriving enterprises that can be created is kind of pretty significant. So coming back to your question, our work is really centered around addressing the barriers to investment for DRE globally and helping DRE achieve their potential. We are now investing $1 billion over the next 3 years towards an energy-enabled green enterprise revolution. These projects will likely include mini grids, commercial, and I was seeing some messages on chat. It's not just about mini grids, but we're also looking at commercial and industrial solutions for underserved SMEs and other scalable solutions for clean and productive power. So we move beyond just the mini grids, but that was an important model for us to really get our hands dirty and really be able to look at the potential of DRE. The three key levers of interventions that the Rockefeller Foundation is focusing on to scale the impact of DRE is unlocking agriculture's potential to drive development through reliable solar-powered energy, facilitating greater participation of women in the energy value chain, and utilizing energy-efficient appliances. So let me elaborate on each one of them briefly. I'll start with unlocking agriculture's potential to drive development. So without sufficient access to power for agriculture and businesses, people risk being locked out of the modern economy. We have begun to broaden this focus of the foundation. Just because someone has a connection to the grid does not mean that they are not suffering from energy poverty. In fact, we estimate that for a country to achieve lower middle income status requires average per capita power usage to reach at least 1,000 kilowatt hours per annum. The energy requirements entailed in cooling, storing, preserving, drying, processing, and transporting protective foods often limit the uptake of a range of critical technologies and processes that otherwise boost the availability and uptake of these foods. By reducing the energy-related barriers, we can ensure the entry of protective foods to the market. Let me go on to my second point, which is really around facilitating greater participation of women in the energy value chain by providing employment and inclusion through DRE. As we make strides towards SDG 7 of achieving universal energy access by 2030, looking at energy access through a gender lens becomes increasingly important. DRE particularly plays an important role in creating jobs for women. Many jobs in the clean energy space go to unskilled and semi-skilled workers, providing greater opportunity for women who are less likely to have the education and training to work in the formal sector. A significant portion of green jobs are performed by women, and around 60% of the informal workforce in the DRE sector is female, often employed as sales agents. Women perform as well as men, or I would say better than men. I'm at the risk of my two panelist males here, but in the energy supply businesses, despite it being a male-dominated sector. Our own experience in Odisha, where we have a network of about 120 women known as Bijli Didis, they collect bills and address consumer concerns. As a result, an additional 8,000 customers started paying bills on time, and over 1,250 houses and 300 businesses got connected to the solar grid. Let me now touch on the final point, which is really around utilizing energy efficient appliances. In solar mini grids, where the cost of electricity can be higher than the central grid, energy efficient appliances become very important in reducing the cost of consumption and reduce generation pressure on the ESCOs. Some factors that affect the adoption of energy efficient appliances include lack of awareness, high upfront cost of these appliances, lack of financing, and underdeveloped marketing channels. Studies conducted by Smart Power India have shown that the adoption of energy efficient appliances has increased when supported with focused distribution and deeper ground level engagement. A pilot test that was done by Smart Power India also demonstrated that an average revenue per user increased by 90%. That is about 228 rupees per user for energy efficient appliance customers itself. So back to you, Samya.
Thank you so much, Dipali, for wonderfully, and Rockefeller, if I hear it right, $1 billion allocation for this space. That's wonderful to know. And love to focus on, the three very critical aspects as well, gender being the most critical right now. So I would like to shift the focus to Saugata now. Has Power Systems has kept innovating, Saugata, in terms of starting with only biomass to moving to solar, now solar biomass hybrid solutions to reduce energy poverty in rural areas. What are some of the major innovations or technologies that are emerging in your experience? And how is the shift in focus from stakeholders such as government, foundations, will help really shape your strategy to create impact?
Right. Yeah. So the technology is a ever moving and ever changing dimension. So while as I told you earlier, we started with biomass and then we integrated solar photovoltaic into biomass, and now we have a hybrid model for biomass solar. And yes, even within this hybrid technology, we are seeing a lot of changes. For example, in solar, the kind of panels that we used to use before, right? Majorly the the thin film and then the polycrystalline panels. Now these are undergoing a change. It's going so gradually. It's moving to more efficient panels. Right now, we're using monopar panels. So these are having much more efficiency than the previous panels. So that is one change in technology that we globally we can see that's happening in terms of panels. If you talk in terms of the structures on which the panels are mounted, so that has also undergone a change. So from a fixed structure, right? So gradually the industry is moving towards tracker systems. So there are single axis trackers, there are double axis trackers. So we are always at the helm of doing experiments and with innovative ideas. We believe in frugal innovations, so we keep on trying to incorporate new if that makes sense in terms of value add to us. So there's a tracker which increases again enhances the energy generation by at least it's said 20%. So that could be a very big change in terms of getting the return on investment faster and also passing on the benefits to the consumers. Then if you talk about the storage solution, that's undergoing a massive change today. So from the previous, earlier it started with the lead acid batteries and then it moved to VRLAs. And today we are talking about lithium ions and big containerized lithium ions. It's not just about our mini grids, but you will find even in megawatt plants, they are talking about lithium ion battery solutions. They are called BESS. So a lot of changes are happening within the framework itself, and we as a one of the leaders in mini grid sectors, we do keep our eyes and ears open and welcome new technologies, new changes. In biomass also, what we had initiated in the way back in 2008, we have undergone a sea change in the technology in between. We have made more automation, we have built in automation, we have built in more logics to cater to the customer requirements. Then we have built a fantastic IoT of our own to monitor the plants, to get all the data of customers, the running hours, the CUF, etc., etc. So these are the things on which we have been working. And today technology is changing faster than it used to change earlier. So no technology really remains beyond 3 to 4 years. So there'll be at least a small delta change in the way the technology runs. So that's it. That's how we are trying to work on.
Saugata, thanks a lot for sharing all the emerging technologies in the DRE space or in the renewable energy space. But really, there is a shift in focus of the stakeholders as well, right? So, how are you changing your strategy to create impact in the changing scenarios?
Okay. Yeah. So if you look at the mini grid sector, this sector has more of social investments, right? The investors having the social impact consideration. So naturally for them, it is more about bringing in, more renewable technologies, right? It's about waste recycling. So investors are talking about, recycling of waste in an environment friendly manner. It's about, controlling or containing the carbon emissions. So definitely the invest from their perspective also, investors are becoming more demanding in terms of seeking more and more renewable technologies, more and more efficiency in these technologies, and also as I said, bringing in more of environmental aspect into it. The social aspect was always there, from the beginning, so that continues to be there. But these are the certain changes that we see that the investors are seeking for when it comes to various series of fundings.
Right. Thank you, Saugata, for explaining this. Moving to Santosh, since you work at the nexus of energy access, agriculture, and climate change at Intellicap, it would be great to hear from you on the interlinkages between these three areas. And really, how do you see, say, climate change and agri-energy nexus in shifting the key considerations of DRE solutions? And maybe how are they enabling greater impact of, of the overall ecosystem?
Thanks, Soumya. I think the linkages between the energy and the DRE and the sectors are very well established, but just kind of reiterating that if you look at the GHG emission or the global emission landscape, 75%, almost 2/3 is energy related. So almost 2/3 of the global emission is caused by the energy usage. I'm clubbing multiple sectors. These are not going sectoral, but use-wise. And within that, the residential consumption, the industrial consumption, the consumption in irrigation, etc., is very critical. So one part is that how DRE reduces that footprint. And if we can switch some of the sectors to DRE, that would become a very, very big impact on overall emission. The second part of DRE linkages is that DRE enables a number of solutions that increase resilience. So as we see the climate change happening, the productivity of the farmland is going down. We see more and more outbreaks of diseases. We see more and more challenges coming in terms of extreme weather. And I think most people would not know that when extreme weather like the Odisha incident, the Fani and other thing that happened, the DRE was the savior. The grid was down, and DRE was the one that provided the basic, services to charge your mobile phone to the lighting. So resilience is also one of the key hallmark of DRE. So agriculture sector is going to immensely benefit because DRE solutions are empowering agriculture, whether it's like moving them from diesel-based irrigation to solar-based irrigation, or making the the land which is not having irrigation because of the power to be irrigated and increase the capacity, or enabling new solutions which could. So one is that the mitigation potential of DRE. The second is that its potential to make the other sectors adopt better to climate change. In fact, let me give you some interesting examples from some of the sectors which often are not linked to DRE. The food sector, the wastage of food that happens. Typically, every ton of food wasted, you see 1 ton of CO2 emission done. Okay, and if you look at the global food wastage, that number is very, very staggering. Their number which can just think of that, it is enormous. I don't want to classify, but it is in the gigaton emission scale that if you just scatter that. Now, DRE enables off-grid cold storages, the solutions that could reduce the food wastage, solutions which could reduce the emission while you produce the food. So not DRE kind of directly addressing the energy poverty, but DRE is also enabling us or equipping us to better handle the climate change, both from mitigation and resiliency potential. So in fact, recently we did a study to just look at the potential of off-grid solar storage or cold storage in India. And the number is roughly around, I think the immediate established market, I'm not talking about the theoretical market, is $4 billion that you could look at that. And this is only the small landlord farmers who could benefit from the small DRE solution. I'm not talking about the bigger scale. Similarly, we are looking at agriculture potential, how it can be enhanced by the productivity is going to hit 50% low in next 5 years. So what we can do to increase the productivity, obviously, you need to use the farm mechanization, better irrigation, all the kind of IoT-enabled smart agriculture. Nothing is possible if you don't have access to power. So for us, DRE is the kind of way ahead if you are looking at mitigating the carbon footprint, as well as making ourselves more resilient. So I'll stop here, but the bottom line, if you want to achieve your Paris 1.5 degree scenario or 2 degree scenario, 2 degree is still kind of far, but 1.5 degree is very aggressive. I would say that DRE is something that you cannot ignore purely from the contribution or numerical value. I'm not counting the co-benefits. DRE has emerged as a strong tool, and it would become even financially and economically more attractive if you take out the subsidies on the competing fossil fuel and the solution.
Okay.
So we always see the DRE in terms of economics is not working out. You should look at the economics of the competing products. If the subsidies moved away from that, DRE would be very, very critical. Last point that I want to highlight, the examples. People often complain and come to us saying that solar water pumps, one of the key DRE solutions that being promoted globally, is not viable because I can buy a similar pump, diesel pump, in very 1/10 of price. Over a 20-year horizon, that's a typical lifespan of the solar pump. It can save you almost 30 to 40% more money, and giving you the benefit of having whenever you want power, which is there for you, as well as you can solve the the mitigation challenge. So that's the nexus we should talk about.
That's wonderful, Santosh. Thanks for explaining it. So breaking it down and explaining it so well. Thanks a lot. It's all about creating that resilience using DRE. Wonderful. Actually, Dipali, I would like to come back to you. The $1 billion fund that you were talking about that's going to focus on agri, women, and energy appliances. How can one access the fund, or what is the potential? What are the kind of investments that you are looking at in these three spectrums that you mentioned?
So thank you, Soumya. What we are really trying to do is, our goal is to ensure that $1 billion will catalyze close to $20 billion in funding by 2030. Wow. So that's the aspiration. What we are trying to do is we want to build a global platform, which will be launched this year at COP26, and will focus on 6 areas. So the first one is leapfrogging into a digitally enabled, gender equitable, and climate smart economic future. I mean, that's the first component. The second one is really introducing renewable electricity solutions for widespread applicability. The third important area is enabling countries to transition more quickly to clean energy, addressing climate change while unlocking inclusive economic growth. And, I don't have time to explain that, but, the choice of every word over there is really, really important. Inclusivity really does matter in this. The next piece is streamlining the supply chains and improving imports for DRE. The fifth component is really around ensuring standardization and scaling low-cost equipment and supplies for DRE. And the last piece is around bringing innovation and technology to scale DRE in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So I think, what you're going to be hearing more in the next couple of months, because obviously, this is not we alone. We're getting a lot of partners together. And I'm hoping that after the conversations, we can invite more and more of the private sector to become part of the journey, because we're a very small drop in the ocean. I think one thing that COVID has taught us, and what we've seen in the last 18 months in the DRE sector in particular, is collaboration. We can only be effective if we collaborate. And I as Santosh put it so eloquently, what we've been able to see and prove is that decentralized renewable energy is faster to build, more reliable, resilient, delivers more equitable access, and avoids emissions from fossil fuel grid supply, and is commercially viable. So how can we don't have to make the arguments. We've tried and tested things. It's really about scale. So
that's wonderful, Dipali. Thank you so much for sharing that. On that very positive note, we've come to the end of the webinar, but we have a few questions. I think a lot of technical ones, as well as questions from the audience, if we could take some of them. So the first one from Vaishali. So India experienced a mass exodus of informal sector workers headed out of cities, homeward bound. After witnessing this phenomenon, not just in India, but globally, a few questions arise. Why are people drawn to living in cities? My question, how can we emulate urban paradigms such as social connection, environmental impact, and economic solutions, and synthesize them with seamless integration in creating semi and peri cities? Should we assume by providing energy to rural areas will address this issue? So Santosh.
I'll answer very briefly. The first part, social connection and others, I think the rural areas have far more, kind of a strong social connection than we have. So I don't think that we should emulate them to follow the urban model. But yes, the economic and other prosperity drivers that are present in urban cities. Surely, the whole idea is that there would be no demarcation between the rural and urban in some time, the way the things are happening. So energy would be a critical driver. If we can think of energy being enabler in those areas, a lot of solutions can be delivered, and surely this would stop the migration from rural to urban. We have seen that in this pandemic, so we know the lessons where we can deliver a lot of things without being the orthodoxy pose challenges. So that's the answer.
Thank you, Santosh. The next question is on market transformation programs. Are they needed to develop or accelerate adaptation and transformation of renewable energy products? If so, what are the biggest challenges to achieve this? Saugata, would you like to take this? Dipali, what sort of market transformation programs are needed for development?
Yeah, I can. Okay, Dipali, you're speaking.
No, go ahead, Saugata.
Yeah, so basically, if we need to scale this up and create this environment for equitable development in both rural and urban areas, then a whole ecosystem has to be built in, and that is very critical. In fact, Government of India has taken up a drive. I don't know if you're knowing about it or not. That so they have set up a Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission for solar energy, which was established in 2010. And so through that, they are trying to build a whole lot of ecosystem in terms of supply chain, in terms of building markets, in terms of building manufacturing. And if that can be done, so it will have a drop down effect onto the population and society at large. It will create jobs, it will create technological advances, and it will create a market, right, for the end users and consumers, and make them more empowered in terms of energy and power, which will in turn lead to lots and lots of economic activities. So that is how the whole market is going to change.
Right. Thank you. Dipali, any views on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think market transformation is absolutely necessary. And I was giving that example of energy efficient appliances, and I think we'll have to replicate some of the successful models like around the LED bulbs. When they were introduced the first time around, they were very expensive. So how do you aggregate demand, and there are various models. We're trying out a few things between Nigeria and China, where we're really trying to look across the market. What's the demand for various solar products which are being sourced, and how do we work more directly with the manufacturers? But there's tremendous potential, and there's a need for the market transformation.
Great. Thank you. There are two very interesting questions actually, and we have about 4 minutes. So we'll just quickly take them before we wrap up the webinar. So one is on how do we ensure social and environmental sustainability in the supply chain of DRE technologies? That is question number one. And what are the ways in which, say, a micro or a small DRE entrepreneur can be integrated into the overall ecosystem? Santosh and Dipali, if you could take these questions. One is on really how to build the supply chain, how to make it socially and environmentally sustainable in the development of DRE technologies. The other is how to integrate micro and small DRE entrepreneurs into the overall ecosystem.
So I think let me just quickly answer that, and Dipali can provide more context. The integration part is very straightforward. The more business models are being evolved, which integrate with the small entrepreneurs. I could see many companies delivering their products to micro entrepreneurs, to village level entrepreneurs. So the value chains are becoming more inclusive to integrate with smaller entrepreneurs, but not all. So I think there is a push from the corporate side also to think of those sustainable business models where communities and small entrepreneurs can be integrated. So this is being done, obviously not universally. The second part is the environmental sustainability of that. I think most of the investors, as you grow big, they insist on the environmental, social, and governance parameters to be followed. But at the small level, these projects are such that they have a very minimal environmental footprint in operations. Life cycle would be different. You can see a life cycle, footprint of the solar panel that is different. but immediate environmental concerns are not there. And this is also emerging space. So as we get the best practices, there's a very big willingness from the stakeholder to adopt them. It's just a matter of highlighting that this is what is the best practice, how it can be done. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Santosh. Dipali, any specific?
No, I think Santosh covered it very well. So thank you. Nothing more to add.
Okay, super. With this, we come to the end of this webinar, Impact Conversations with Aavishkaar Group, episode 7. I would like to thank the speakers, Dipali, Santosh, Saugata, for joining us today and giving like a very broad as well as very specific view on how we should be focusing on DRE to actually create resilience and create or trigger economic prosperity in off-grid areas or rural areas where it's most needed. And last, audience, thank you so much for joining from across. We really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this session. I know there are many questions that are coming up, so we'll try to respond to them through email. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your time. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.